Another day, another story. Irina, Bucha. Irina was afraid to leave her house after the Russians seized Bucha. She stayed at home with her sick mother and waited to die. They lived on Jablonska Street, which later became infamous as Death Street. On the fourth day of the occupation, a neighbor came to draw water from the well and told Irina that the Russians allowed those who had a white armband on their sleeve to go out. Irina began to go out into the courtyard to cook over an open fire and draw water. The Russian soldiers were housed in two neighboring houses. They did not live in Irina's modest house, but placed an armored vehicle in her yard, camouflaged with rags. Russian soldiers often came to the well to fill square plastic containers with water. Irina talked to them, saying she was very scared. They said they were scared too. The military, especially those arriving as part of the first wave of the invasion, were very frightened. It was impossible to get used to the shooting. On March the 18th to the 19th, there was a rotation of the military. New soldiers arrived. Wherever they stationed their vehicles, the Ukrainian army hit them very accurately. The Russians were taking casualties. Irina did not see the bodies of the Russian soldiers because the military, retreating, did not leave their comrades lying in the street. As she cooked outside, she could hear what the soldiers in neighboring houses were talking about. In the first days of the occupation, Irina thought the soldiers were victims of circumstances until she saw the atrocities they committed. The Russians killed 3 men and buried them near a neighbor's house. Then they killed her acquaintance Dima, who was sitting outside the house smoking. At the nearest crossroads, the soldiers drove the men out of the house. They came out with their hands up, then the soldiers threw a grenade inside. The owner of the house was killed and his body lay in the street for a month. Irina watched through the window as Russian soldiers buried the body of another neighbor. Irina's mother could not get medical care. She died on March 14th. Irina asked 2 men living in the basement of the apartment building to help with the funeral. The Russian military allowed her to be buried in the yard. While the men were digging the grave, an armored vehicle was standing nearby. In April, when this photo, above, was taken, Irina's mother's body was still resting in the yard. After her mother's death, Irina moved to a safer place, the basement of an apartment building. Sometimes Irina would go home to cook food or change clothes. One day the Russians came into the basement and said that it was now forbidden to walk around Jablonska because it was being shelled. Irina believes it was an attempt to hide the extent of the atrocities from the locals. Thanks for watching.